Are you not entertained? Are you not hyped? Welcome everyone. My name is MrThingyman, at least that's my online name, as most of you know me as. My real name is Michael, but that's not what we're here to talk about. This is the Mafia Championship podcast. This is the 6th episode. I'm very happy that we're doing this, and we're doing this because all you guys out there are supporting and also excited about this, and that makes all of us excited about this. 7th season of the Mafia Championship. 165 communities are participating. Of those 165 communities, 45 players will be advancing to 3 semifinal games. And finally, after that, we will have our finals, which will consist of this season's 15 best players. So there's a lot to look forward to. Tomorrow, game 11 starts, which is the last qualifier. So we're almost nearing the end, but not quite there. Still some good action to watch. And so the big question is, who will join the ranks of D. Wetzel, Cool Kid, Whiskey Jack, Dels, General Handkerchief, and Beck? Maybe it might be someone from this game that we'll be talking about today. There's good reason to think so, because we're talking about Game 6. Fittingly, this is episode 6, we'll be talking about Game 6. The only game in the history of the Mafia Championship to feature a town sweep. Yes, I did not misspeak. You heard that right. For the first time in 7 seasons, all Mafia members were lynched consecutively from day 1 onwards. All 3 Mafia members. I cannot state enough how excited I've been for this podcast, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. And, well, let me just bring up everyone here. All right, guys, you can unmute yourselves.
Tim Hortons.
All right, as you can see, I'm not alone by any means, and actually I have an extra guest compared to what I usually have here today. That is because I have the host of Game 6, Amy, with me today, who will actually be acting as a co-host, or actually the main host today. Needless to say, Amy followed the game much more than I did or have had time for, so it's only appropriate. Besides Amy, we have Cobalt, Nuxl, JaggedJimmyJay, shortened to JJJ here, and Wisp, 4 players from Game 6. I know some of them are sleep deprived, so we'll try to stay within the allotted time today, which is 1.5 hours. Well, let's walk through these people. Or actually, let me first summarize the votes from Game 6. In 4th place, we have DS, who earned 29 points. In 3rd place, we have Giraffe Syrup, who earned 35 points. In 2nd place, we have Stay Positive Friend from Epic Mafia, earning 38 points. And in 1st place, we have with us here today, JaggedJimmyJay, earning 61 points. JaggedJimmyJay from the Syndicate. Previously, Rate Your Music migrated to the Syndicate. Have played before, have been a finalist before. So will he make it again? That's to be seen. And the 61 points, by the way, is tying Rand's record for the most points earned in a 15-player game. So that is definitely something to be proud of, no matter how the rest of the season shapes up. And with that, let's start with you, Jay. Tell us a bit about yourself, your Mafia history, and yeah.
Certainly. Like you said, I got started on Rate Your Music in 2011, I think it was. And many of the people who are regulars at the Syndicate now and have represented the Syndicate followed the same path I did. Names you may recognize like Slooney, MacDougal, Dunya. All of us migrated from RYM to the Syndicate in about 2015. So I represented RYM in Season 2. And now I'm representing the Syndicate here. And I've been extremely proud to do so. And I feel very fortunate because the Syndicate is loaded with quality players, and to be given the honor of representing the site is something I'm very proud
of. Just Playing Cool is asking in Twitch chat, by the way, hello to everyone in Twitch chat. Very happy that you're here. Makes this a whole lot more fun. Feel free to ask questions as we go. I'll try to keep an actual... This works well with 2 hosts. I'll try to keep an eye on the questions, and you focus on the agenda, Amy, and we can tag team that way. So... Just Playing Cool asking in chat, is Jay gonna go off on another song? Jay, if you do want to perform your song later on, you should feel very free to. You can to warm up to that. I think that'll make for an excellent clip.
We can see how the podcast develops, but I don't know if the airtime should be wasted on my voice.
Already with the excuse. All right, fair enough. All right, we have Cobalt, previously originating from a gay teen forum. Unfortunately, Cobalt told me that forum closed down recently. That's a shame to see.
Yes.
A lot of mafia, a mafia community's history just evaporated. That's a
Yeah.
shame. We hate to see that. But migrated to a similar story. Also a previous championship representative. Also migrated to a very strong community, Dark Lord Potter, who Cobalt has represented this year. Take it away. Introduce yourselves.
Hi. I'm Cobalt, or I mean, you can call me JT too, but most people just call me Cobalt because that's what I've been going by since Gay Teen Forum when I was like 14 years old. The site was actually originally archived back in 2018, but there was some behind the scenes drama and the whole site got taken down, which is very tragic. I spent, most of my childhood, adolescence into early adulthood there. And it was a great forum to play Mafia on. I hosted a bunch of games there. I represented them for, I think, season 2, 3, 4, and 5. I believe. I believe it was consecutive. I was a wild card in season 5, which was a lot of fun to play in that wild card game. I wish I could go back to that game. But yeah, I mean, I've sort of found my second home in Dark Lord Potter. I've been playing there for a couple of years on and off. And I'm so grateful that they, welcomed me in and that I was able to represent them this year. It's a huge honor. There are so many great players that come from that site. Like Newcomb and Vimes and Fonty and all of my best friends that I spent so many years there with. So it was a real honor to represent them and to be a part of this game in particular, which has made history. So it was a lot of tons of fun this year.
For sure. Both Syndicate and Dark Lord Potter and Rate Your Music have great histories in the Mafia Championship. Great records. Nuxl from Smogon. Welcome to the podcast, and I'm very happy you decided to play in the championship. I do believe, and you can mistake me if I'm wrong, because I look at a lot of sites, and I do believe you had some hesitation a bit about playing, but at least I'm very happy that you did decide to play.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Nuxl. I'm from Smogon.com, where we embarrassed ourselves 2 years in a row because our first guy in season 6, Dustfall, got mislynched the wrong person in Lilo, I think. And then I got sent this year, and so basically, so I guess we can touch about that. So I started playing 4 Mafia in 2018. I randomly joined a Smogon game, and I thought it was gonna be really fun. I rolled Town. We won in a close game at Lilo, and I was like, yes, I love 4 Mafia. Let's play some more. The more I played, the more I was like, I don't like rolling scum as much as I think I do. And so basically Smogon's been my home site, and they sent me here as a rep because there was a poll, and then I decided to and then I just like got voted in, and that's why I was sent to the champs. But as you can see, I got absolutely obliterated this year, so maybe they should send somebody else next year. That's fine.
Someone is typing very loudly on the keyboard, by the way. I'm not sure if that is. Yeah, no, I believe the hesitation wasn't necessarily about playing, but maybe hoping not to rant scum, if I'm not mistaken. Wisp, the final man up. Please introduce yourselves.
How's it going, guys? My name is Wisp. Also, I don't mind if people call me Kyle. I've been playing 4 Mafia since 2017. I was introduced to it by my brother, who most people know by Shinichi. My original site was my anime list, our forum. That we had a club on that forum, which is where we started. And then once OC Orb joined from MTGS, sometime later last year, we decided to make our own site because we wanted to have better Mafia integration because we didn't really have anything because ISOing was impossible. And now we have our own Mafia site. I played last year in champs, I was the sub for Liars Club. I didn't actually expect to play since I was the sub to Lady Lane Delta, which he's an amazing player. But I ended up getting subbed into a random game where I was completely terrible up until Lilo, which I eventually found a team. Then I died, and then they proceeded to mislynch the person I told them not to lynch. I don't really play in MU as much anymore. Usually I only come back to MU for events. I played in the Hydra event last year, where the same thing. I got to Lilo. It was pretty terrible. The wolves were busting each other, so it was very confusing to read the votes. And I got into Lilo, and I lynched the wrong person. And Varanus doesn't let me live that down since he messages me every week telling me about that game. And yep, that's pretty much it.
That's it. Glad to have you as well on the podcast, Wisp. Oh, and speaking about Smogon, there's still there's a loud typing from someone.
I don't hear it right now.
No, right now it's not there. I see Psy Dollar in the chat from Psy Fanatic. Good to see you. Good to see everyone in the chat. All right, last up, we have the host of Game 6, which is Amy. What's up?
Hello, yes, hi. Ampharos on Mafia Universe, for those of you who don't know. I actually am originally from Nuxl's home site, Smogon. Started playing there around 2011. Played mostly games that are not really Mafia at all. A lot of out-of-thread communication, a lot of fuckery involving different sized teams and stuff like that. It wasn't until 2016 when I found out about Mafia Universe that I really started playing like real forum Mafia. And ever since then, I've been kind of using MU as my anchor and sort of just like wandering around, playing on different sites, trying out different games in different places. I rep Cernus Forest, which is a Fire Emblem website, in the championships back in 2018, season 5. Made it to wild cards, and then the season mysteriously ended there. It was weird. I don't know what happened. I don't have any memory of it.
Best wild card game.
It was, anyways. Yeah, MU's sort of become like my new adopted home community. I'm here more than I am anywhere else, but really I just sort of enjoy Mafia communities in general at this point. And hosting Game 6 was a blast. I love hosting champs games, so happy to be able to be here and talk about it.
Awesome. Amy, my fellow admin, the heir to my throne. Should ever something happen to me? Yeah,
mysteriously.
Mysteriously. Better not tell my address to anyone. All right. So, like I said earlier, actually, Amy or Ampharos is the host of this podcast. I know Amy's prepared an agenda, so I'll let you get to it.
Yeah, so I have an agenda that you could charitably call inspired by some of Thingy's old agendas. So we'll dive right into it. I think the first thing we're going to talk about is we're just going to briefly touch on like voting philosophy, because I think the voting is still what's most fresh in everyone's minds. And I just want to like briefly go around and ask people like, just sort of, I'm not asking anyone to reveal their votes. Obviously, you can if you want, but I just sort of want to generally touch on like what sort of things you look for when you're deciding who to vote through in post game. And I guess whoever wants to talk, if anybody's got something in mind.
Sure. I think that our game was very unique, beyond just being the only sweep, whatever, in the character of the players that took part in it and the attitudes that they conveyed and the camaraderie that we enjoyed. And I think that went well beyond simply being nice to each other, and it was beneficial to the town. And that played into the way that I voted. I feel that teamwork was the single most important thing that drove the game towards its inevitable conclusion. And with that in mind, when I placed my votes, I had that hit high on the priority list. Not only who played as a team, but who facilitated teamwork who made their teammates better. And that's not it. I mean, we had so many good players across the board. Honestly, the way the votes shook out, I don't think reflected the game. You can shuffle anybody in that top 4, and it's still deserved into any position in any order. We had amazing power role play. I took that into account. I even tried to the best of my ability, extrapolate how I felt somebody's approach might translate to the opposite alignment. Of course, there are limitations to how we can do that, but you make your best effort.
Right, yeah, of course. Speaking of opposite alignment, I actually do want to specifically hear from Nuxl on this question, I think, because Nuxl's, got a unique perspective on the matter, being on the, receiving end of the...
of the beating.
Yes. I did do that. So we just want to talk about votes. So the way I voted, I thought there were going to be 3 immediate players who were going to move on, and those were I thought the votes would actually fall like JaggedJimmyJay first. I thought it was going to be DS second, and I thought it was going to be SPF third. And that's not how I voted, but that's how I thought everything else was going to go. And I didn't know for the 4th. My personal 4th was Fatmo, just because I thought he did a really good job of like. I thought he was like uniquely like very good at like getting town red, and just like had a sense of like he had a really good like cohesion. And I thought that really helped bring like town together and like unify them. But I was like scared of like a lot of people this game because one, I rolled Wolf on the alignment that I think is like 1,000 times worse than my town game, and then it's like, well, I guess I'll just be caught. Like that's fun. But like, no, I thought a lot of people did a really good job of making cases, and I kind of based it basically on like what I felt was an excellent like day 1. I thought JaggedJimmyJay did a lot of really good work on day 1. I thought SPF and DS2 did a lot of good work, and that sort of like momentum helped set the ball rolling for the rest of like the PoE. Because Mello doesn't get lynched, maybe something else like goes a little bit differently, but he did, and that just kind of like led up into the end of the game.
Would you say that your votes were ranking 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 of who you feared the most, or was it more nuanced than that for you?
It was not like more I feared the most, but I felt like who would be a really good, who I thought had a really good opening, and also who I felt would do an kind of an excellent job if they moved on in regard to like either alignment. But I thought there was like a clear like top 3 of people who I felt was very unlucky to not roll town with, because I thought they played like excellently. Not to say that the entire town didn't play excellently. I just thought they were kind of on a slightly higher pedestal for me.
Right. Wisp, Cobalt, if you've got anything to add, feel free to jump in here. I didn't want to spend too much time on this particular point, since everybody's itching to talk about the game itself.
No, I mean, I think they did a pretty good job of like. Am I okay? Yes. Sorry.
We can hear you.
Weird. Okay. No, I think they did a pretty good job of summing it up. I mean, for me, I'll talk about this a little bit later when it comes to a more appropriate time to talk about it, but I did a lot of playing around people this game, and I based my votes based on who I was most comfortable playing around because of their approach, and that was something that I think contributed to the unified village, was having outspoken people who projected really great tone and effort, and that's something that people were able to rally around. Players like me who maybe didn't have as much of a direct presence or impact sort of were able to take initiative from those players, and that's what I based my votes on.
So I have a question regarding to this, because I think this is a very interesting point you bring up, actually, Cobalt, regarding the dynamics of game and forming a town core and which kind of players you need and which roles they have to take in the game or play in the game to feed off each other in a good way for town. Because I can see it in myself, so I don't think it's a negative at all for someone to be more passive than the like aggressive town leader, the one doing all the pushing and such. Like I've taken both roles in my games as town, so I think they both have their benefits. Basically, I think for a town to work well, you don't need 10 leaders, each trying to lead their own way. You need followers as well. And I don't like the word follower, but you all get the gist of what I'm saying. Like
Right.
You need people who are willing to listen to a good case and admit, yeah, that's a good case. Or maybe I don't agree with all of it, but yeah, I think this is a good thing to push. And I'm trying to play to my win condition, and that's the one thing you should do in a Mafia game.
That's exactly the kind of play style I found myself falling into this game. Because
I'm actually
Sorry,
sorry.
go
Go ahead. No. You finish.
No, it's okay. That's exactly the kind of play style I felt myself falling into this game, and I think I'll talk about that a little bit later because I think there's another opportunity in the agenda to touch on play style in general.
Yeah, I want to add one thing to this because I can imagine, and this, like, I didn't even closely read this game, so I'm not involved with jury, I should say to everyone, and I couldn't even give recommendations to the jury if I wanted to, because I haven't read the game. So my opinions are just these are general opinions. That is an interesting thing, and I could expect a jury to more so value the louder voices because they're more flashy. Like those are what you notice, and you see them getting results, and you maybe don't notice the other players as much. But the question becomes, and I'm not sure what the answer is. It's because it's a good question, and if you put a lot of leaders into the wildcards, can they work well together? Previous history will say that at least the wildcards, generally town have done very well in those games. But it is an interesting thing to ponder, and I guess the thing to look for is whether players are generally just able to collaborate and work well with others. And if someone has both those abilities in them, the ability to lead and the ability to follow when others are making good points, I think that's makes a good town player.
Yeah, I think it's all about adapting. Like, you don't all need to be the leader. Like, personally, like, I play to what needs to be played. If someone else is being a good voice, then usually I'll just spend most of my time making sure that their cases make sense so that we're not accidentally mislynching town.
Yeah. Wisp is slowly leaning out of frame, Bunny Boy Blue says in chat. We're losing you. All right.
Yeah, so I actually did want to quickly mention that I agree that it's a really like important thing that y'all bring up about like being able to identify who necessarily are going to be like the larger voices in the town and who's going to actually be driving the game state, and be able to play around that and to understand that, well, if you've got 11 people or however many villagers you've got all saying that they're the town core and everyone needs to listen to them, you're not going to get anything done. I'm actually sort of writing an article actually about whatever the opposite of power villaging is and how to do it effectively. So look forward to that, I guess. Shameless plug. The first of many, I expect. But let's go ahead and get into the game itself. So a quick recap for those of you who didn't follow the game necessarily. Like Thingy said at the beginning of the podcast, it's the first and so far only champ sweep, or town sweep rather, in Champ's history, which is obviously a big change from how most Champs games go, which is some absurd wolf win rate. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now. But yeah, day one, they come out the gate, everybody's firing on all cylinders. And I guess if someone wants to just take over and talk about it from their perspective, because I think that'll be a lot more interesting than hearing me ramble about it.
Actually, I think I want to contextualize this whole discussion because we're talking about a town sweep. And again, this is the first time it's ever happened. So I also want to like really contextualize how impressive this is. And I think people might also be interested to know, have we had other dominant town performances ever? How close did we get? And how is it generally with Mafia lynches? All right, so I have a question for all of you. So we'll start this off with a quiz. When a mafia is lynched day one, which side wins more, town or mafia? Only counting the game.
Champs or in general?
This is in champs. So out of champs games, where a mafia was lynched day one, so they get that good start, they get a mafia lynched day one. Which side wins more after that, mafia or town?
I think mafia, because it's champs.
Same. Any other situation, I say town, but not.
Does anyone think it's town?
I think it could be town in some cases because lynching the mafia earlier might leave them to get less information.
Yeah. Well, I can reveal that it is indeed mafia. The mafia tend to take the win, even after a mafia is lynched day one. This goes back to my own personal theory that when a mafia is lynched, especially day one, it is often with the help of mafia. This, interesting, wasn't the case in your game, so that's also another impressive fact about it. But generally, when a mafia is lynched day one, it's with the help of mafia, and, well, people just tend to give those mafia passes, it appears, generally. They didn't at all win. All right, so next question. How many games out of all the games we've had, and actually I don't know how many games we had, but we'd had at least more than, we have 7 seasons, and generally, let's say a bit less than 10, let's just say we've had at least 60 games, at least 60 championship games. I think it may be a bit more. How many times have we had games where Mafia was lynched day one and day two consecutively? Feel free to give guesses.
There was one in season 6, right?
It can't be more than like 4 or 5.
I'd say probably less, honestly.
I'm gonna say 4.
Amy says 4, Jay says 3. What do you say, Cobalt?
I say 3.
3, Nuxl?
I think I know of 2, but I'll just go like 4. Sure.
4? Wisp?
Sure.
I'll go with 5.
And let me just double check. I have it here. That is 1. That is 2. That is 3. That is 4. And with this, it's 5. So 5 times in the history of Mafia Championship, a Mafia has been lynched at least 2 days consecutively. And I can reveal that out of those 5, 2 of them were 3 times. So 3 times consecutively. Days 1 to 3. Mind you. And in all these games, the town won. So when they lynched 2 Mafia in a row, it seems, well, that's a victory. Actually, I lied. There is one example. And that is the game where a Mafia was lynched day 1, day 2, and day 3. The town ended up losing that game, which is indeed the Saurian game, a 17er. So they lynched Mafia days 1 through 3. And Saurian went all the way, made an epic comeback to win the game. So this just to contextualize how many games there have been. Because if we're speaking dominant town performances, this is the most dominant town performance there has ever been. I would say there are only 2 others. Oh, well, there are 2 others on the top 3, and they're definitely not number 1. But the 2 other contenders are Season 1 Finale, in which I played myself, where Mafia was killed day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. But day 2 was a mod kill. He would have been gotten anyway, but it is technically a mod kill. So that is 5 consecutive days. And then the last one survived some days after that. The other one is the infamous Bimps game, where he shot Benny. And that was the only negative to that game. Otherwise, they lynched the Mafia days 2, day 3, day 4, and then killed the Mafia on night 4. So those are the 3 most dominant town performances. And with that, I've set the stage, because this is, again, definitely the most dominant town performance ever. And very well done to you, town players. And you probably need to ask the question again, Amy. Sorry.
Yeah, no. My question was just going to be to, I guess, any of the town players, if they want to walk us through what their recollection is of how we got to that day 1 Mafia kill and what was going through their minds at the time.
I think, do you want to focus on the whole day or the end of day sequence when things
I mean, we can talk about the whole day and then just sort of take a microscope laser in on the end of the day there.
Well, I think that starting from page 1, some of the loudest town voices were fortunate to find each other. And when you can so immediately begin to form a core of players with whom there is mutual trust, then the Mafia are immediately placed in a position of not only disadvantage, but discomfort. And knowing from experience that discomfort can become extreme, and that can affect the rate with which they participate, the content that they put in their posts, the way that they word their sentences, and it opens the door for some maybe mistakes that wouldn't otherwise be made. And it's an environmental situation. We created a suffocating environment, and that required everybody's cooperative and collaborative effort. But the eventual lynch, I think, is also owed in part to DS having claimed in his first post. We all know that Mello Weslow claimed as well at the end of the day to attempt to evade the noose, which was the right move. But we already had one claim in tow, which influences the way that we perceive the probabilities, how likely it is that Mello Weslow is being truthful or not. And also owe some of that to Stay Positive Friend for immediately responding to the claim with a no.
No, I think I said the same thing. I think it was Nuxl that said maybe we should move to. I forgot who he said to move to, and then I responded just immediately.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said at all.
Sure.
I wasn't trying to switch the wagon. I was trying to like have like things like, you know, move pressure, but the plan was already just like always to like switch back to Mello Weslow, because there was like no way he was not getting lynched that day because of just town, you know, just like coalescing on him like that.
What Nuxl is saying, he was caught for the wrong reasons, you guys. Shame on you.
I think.
Well, I don't know. It was probably like bad in retrospect. Like, I think I'm a very easy read, so I think if I do get scumred, it is probably accurate. But no, that wasn't what I was trying to go for at all. But everyone kind of just like did that, and I was like, well, I guess I fucked up by existing. So no, but yeah.
I think we owe a lot of it to the fact that DS did claim in his first post, because as far as I know, the consensus in spec chat was, why are you lynching a claim? What the hell are you doing?
That was exactly the spec chat consensus.
Right,
I was there.
right.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that DS did claim in his first post and already put a power roll on the table, Town was less scared of saying, no, I don't believe that claim. I think that, and I think what JaggedJimmyJay said, to Stay Positive Friend's reaction to it as well, I think definitely bolstered the town. But I think if it weren't for the fact that we already had a JOAT on the table, I think Mello very well could have avoided the lynch by claiming that day. So
Maybe.
I think that's...
There's been a lot of talk of decisions versus results, and some saying this was results-oriented thinking, that this was a good idea, and not decision-based thinking. I would say if you're gonna do this, you better get it right. And if you get it right, then that's okay. And if you continue, like if you have this rule, but you break it sometimes, but you get it right each of those times, if you keep getting it right, then you're excused, in my opinion, because there are other factors and there is context to take into consideration. So I will always excuse it in these cases. I want to mention one thing, because if we had to make a top 4 of the most dominant town performances, there is actually a game that pops up with Jay's name in it. The very first game that he played back in season 2, the Mafia were lynched consecutively day 2, 3, and 4. Jimmy was in that game, or Jay was in that game. Advanced Chromatic was also in that game. Both finalists and both semifinalists this season. So it's not the first time that a game with Jay has been very dominating for the town.
I remember that game well, and I think the agenda mentioned Gun to Head reads coming up soon, and that game was the birthplace of that exercise. So
I think that Giraffe's post specifically was like when he said the question here isn't if Mello is the joke. The question here is if Mello is Mafia, and the answer is 100% yes.
Yeah, that was a good.
That was one
I
of the best.
I think that post had Spec Chat losing their minds.
I could spend the next 30 minutes telling Spec Chat why they're wrong. I think I'll.
I mean, I think Spec Chat often spends hours at a time telling itself that it's wrong. So I don't necessarily think that you're alone there.
Spec Chat has been wrong.
Like after night one, a lot of people think Spec Chat didn't think I was a wolf, but everyone in the game like came to that conclusion. Which is really funny after I got lynched day 2.
I remember distinctly being extremely disappointed that you were lynched while I was not in the thread, because I had a general finger of suspicion on you on day 1, and I did a lot of work during the day and day 2 where I was sort of just like working on my own notes, and I had a case that I was planning to bring up, and I get to the thread after I got out of work because I was working the whole day, and you were already lynched. So I was just like, oh, cool. So I don't get any credit for that. Awesome.
Yeah. Day 2 was like, I don't know. I thought the way like Scum Team was kind of set up for me was like a mess. Like not like blaming my scummates or anything, because I'm an atrocious scum player, as you saw by the fact that that I was part of the biggest townspeople of all time. But we weren't like very coordinated, just because like I think I posted like 12 hours before the game started in scum chat, and I got no response. I come back like 2 hours before game start. I post again. I'm like, hey, I made a Discord. Let's join and like talk things out. No response. And it's game start, and my scum members are like MIA. So I'm like, am I just gonna sit here for? Because I thought people would be more attentive, because champs. And then Mello and I started talking, and then Begbo's first entrance into the thread was his string of posts on day 1. So I was like, and then he saw scum chat, I think like 20 minutes after, and then started playing through there. But it was definitely like not the environment I want to set up for myself. But I didn't know how to fight a tsunami basically of coordinated town players. So I don't know. I played pretty badly. It happens.
I'm honestly not sure that you did.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree. I wouldn't say that either.
Yeah, thought you were town. And if
I mean, Nuxl, I think you were legitimately one of the least guessed players by Spec Chat on night 1. I think there were like 4 people that had you Mafia out of like 20 something guesses. I actually think the most guessed scum person on night 1 after Mello obviously was Stay Positive Friend, because Spec Chat loves their tinfoil.
I like my tinfoil too.
Once the tinfoil is introduced, it never goes out of style. Seems to be the general theme. Well, I have a question here for everyone, because this is relating to like the sweep. And this question is from Sai and goes to everyone. Were you confident of the hammer on Begbo day 3?
I was not. I will say that like flat out. I thought that was the most low-hanging fruit to ever be low-hanging fruit. And it just got to the point where I looked at the thread and I was like, okay, well, we might as well get this over with, because otherwise we're just going to waste more and more time. If this person doesn't get lynched today, they're going to be a lynch candidate later on. And it also was an element of trust. I sort of just was like, all right, you know what? I trust these people. I get it. I'm going to just go with the flow. And I said, screw it. And I was very surprised, honestly.
I think personally, like if you just looked at the PoE of everyone, it was easy to conclude that he was probably the highest chance of flipping Mafia. Like even like day 2, people were hesitating on Nuxl and Rise. Let's call him Rise. I was the one making sure that no one lynched Rise, because I thought Nuxl was the better hit.
with respect to Big Bow, I'd say that when the day started, that was the first place my mind went because of PoE, like Wisp said. But I wouldn't say that I was confident until SPF thoroughly cased the crap out of Big Bow and made it clear that that was the best choice. So I attribute that lynch and the success therein more to her than to anyone else. She really carried that one through because I didn't think that that slot was one that we could case very effectively. And Begbo was under immense pressure to play in his first Mafia game on a forum ever.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
imagine doing that as a mafioso against what we were doing. That's unfair.
Yeah, literally.
Cruel.
SPF.
And it doesn't help that if I remember correctly, I think one of the jokes, I don't remember who it was, but I think cleared I think one of the jokes cleared Rizlin, yeah.
Yeah. I did.
So that sort of knocked out half the PoE right there.
Yeah, there was a lot of thread focus on Riesland, and I think that that was an extremely wise slot. Like, I think that was a really smart slot to track or clear.
Yeah.
Especially based on the fact that with two scum dead, the Jote actually amplifies its power
Immensely.
because emotion detect is a guilty. It's like, especially later on in the game, I think that I think we had a lot of really good Jote play, but I think clearing Riesland was one of the better plays for sure.
Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
I was thinking like, I mean, he could still be a wolf, but like, the check itself was probably the best check because it removed him from the PoE if we were wrong. So.
Right, and I believe DS also cleared Cyclone Cache at the same time. So
Yes.
put the
I think
both
you're
of
right.
those-
yeah.
Was that a real clear or was that a fake clear? Because there were so many fake clears, I
This-
can't remember.
this
Yeah,
was-
and I actually do think we could go out of order a little bit on the agenda here because I had general joke mechanics as like a big item on here because first of all I wanted to talk about the merits of hard claiming in your very first post. And I also wanted to talk about the merits of all the fake targeting that was going around, especially on like day 2, if anybody has any thoughts on either of those points.
I
Sure.
don't have any idea on the hard claiming. I haven't really thought about it yet, but personally, like the fake claiming, I think Nuxl didn't respond to it in the best, but I think that is one of the easiest things to like fake as a wolf. So I don't really think it holds much merit. At least that's my personal opinion on the fake claiming.
I think with respect to DS's claim immediately when the game began, the efficacy of that move depends upon the ability of the player making the claim to play the wine game and to manipulate the Mafia team into falling for the plays that they can make accordingly. And DS did a wonderful job of that. And then by the time Wisp had claimed, it was clear that they had full command over the kill selection. And of course, you can correct me if that's not true, Nuxl. But the interplay between those two was brilliant. And I think that it makes a lot of sense that DS would be effective in faking his tracks or his motion detects, given that he also played the wine game to claim in his first post. Those two moves are very congruent with each other, and it worked.
You would think, based on the setup, that an early claim would be a really big risk because you have a town player that's exposed to the Mafia of what they are right off the bat. They know where they need to go, but I think what DS did was he actually put Scum at a disadvantage because of the wine game that JaggedJimmyJay is talking about, because now you have Scum saying, well, now we can't shoot this person because they're going to get protected, and then that leads into a whole bunch of other wine of what if the other Jote doesn't use their protect on the first night because he knows Scum is not going to shoot there, and it just steamrolls, and then we have both Jotes surviving until the end of the game because they really couldn't do anything about it.
That's another thing to say, right? Just to have it on the record that they're both surviving and it's sweet. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
very dominant.
Yeah, I know for a fact that the night one kill onto Andre was specifically a Dr. Dodge. And I know that I know that Nuxl's day two was influenced a lot by the Jotes, because at one point I remember, I think it was DS who claimed a successful track on Begbo, and it was a fake claim, but Begbo really had been the one who carried out the kill. So Nuxl was like
Excellent.
freaking out, and I think that probably factored in a lot to Nuxl getting killed that day, was his reaction to that whole shenanigans. And Nuxl, feel free to step in and correct me if I've misconstrued anything.
No, I'll be completely real. I'm pretty sure we lost like in the first 10 minutes of day two, and my entire goal was going to be to avoid a complete sweep, but I just kind of stopped, kind of like trying to do that, because it was just really like disheartening. I don't know, because I rolled scum in this game, and I literally looked at my roll PM, and I was like, wow, I don't think I'm going to have very much fun, which is like not because of like anything that happened in the game. It's just because I just hate playing the alignment in general. But it's like, but yeah, going back to actually day two, the Andre kill was one. Yeah, it was a dodge. In hindsight, I'm pretty sure we should have took that risk onto DS anyway, because I think if it failed, it wouldn't have changed much about like the game state of the game. And I also want to get Andre because it was like, is there a questionable kill? Because I felt like a lot of people would have like killed like Giraffe or something, because I'm pretty sure like Mello spewed him down. And I just thought like he would like tinfoil harder. But there was just like, I just think I had to put like an extraordinary like amount of effort into day two. And then once I saw like DS like track quote unquote Begbo, and like Begbo's sort of reaction, and I was just like, I'm pretty sure we're just infinitely in the PoE forever. So but yeah. Did I feel like I went on a tangent there? My bad.
No, we're still in the
All
same
good.
general ballpark. I guess a question I do have for you is, did it like enter your head at any point that it could have been like a fake claim, or that he could be FPSing basically?
Yeah, I did buy the Begbo track. But I think even if I like, I don't think that changed much throughout the general like course of day two though. Trying to think of what else. I guess I actually, this setup was obviously like town-sided because like by a fair margin, just because like champs in general, like wolves tend to win more. But it's also like I always felt like if a joke claimed, the second joke could claim, like should probably be claiming the same day. Just so you get that out of the way. And also because they can, YFOM. I've never said that word in real life before. The 9 actions. Just because they're both existing, but DS had a really good plan with the actual like his actual claim, and then using it to set up into fake claims. So yeah.
At this point, I don't even remember what his actual action was that night. I'm gonna be real with you.
But would the rest of you agree with this? Because I think that may be a controversial statement, Nuxl, that if one Jote claims on day one, the other should follow. Would the rest of you agree with that?
I think the way it was set up, I wouldn't have if it were me, because just to be complacent with the angle that DS was playing, I think it would have been better. I think what happened was the ideal scenario where we had Wisp come out on day two. I wouldn't have claimed on day one if I were the other Jote.
Yeah, I just meant that in a position where a Jote was forced to claim. I think everybody should mass. But I think DS had. I think DS's alternative was definitely really good for the game itself. Just in the way it worked.
Fair enough. I missed that point, Nuxl, of course. That changed things if the Jode is forced to claim. Because then there may be benefits to just laying it out on the table and at least get some clarity or maybe just 2 clears. With regards to the town sidedness or whether or not it's town sided, I also saw someone write about it in chat. Yes, Mafia does tend to win more. We do not, I can clarify this, we do not try to make these games town sided. We try to make them balanced in a what would be a normal MU setting. So if it's a 50-50 win rate in a normal MU game, then we would use that. We would not try to overcompensate, so to say, even though some believe we've done this, but that's just because they don't have the same thoughts and balance as we do, and that those thoughts do differ. But looking at a Cup 13er and how that is balanced, and that is a very balanced game over a large sample size. It is the largest sample size we have of a game to my recollection. I think 200 games or so played, and it was 50-50 town, 50-50 win rate, and I think this compares to that, so it should be about the same. And with champs being more Mafia sided, at least in qualifiers, I would expect to see Mafia win a bit more, maybe 60-40.
What's our current win rate at? I know we have
2 town wins and 1 draw,
wins.
and I don't know how many losses we've had. 4.
I think we've got 4. I think that means we've got 4 scum wins, and then there's 3 games still ongoing.
Yeah,
with game 11 starting Monday.
And already, and actually, Mendel, we have a thread in the this season's sub forum, and Mendel wrote a very good post there about stats and variance, and if Town even only wins 3 of these 11 qualifiers, it's still within the range of we can't say anything. I think even with 2, if it only ends up being 2 Town wins, it's still a bit difficult to say anything with a lot of certainty, because there's just variance of play. Like if you flip a coin 11 times, sometimes you just get tails 2 times. It does happen. So it's hard to predict too much from just the sample size.
I mean, for this game specifically, I think it's really sort of impossible to evaluate the balance of the setup given how well Town played, just like from an individual standpoint, even completely ignoring power rolls. I think if this were like a mountainous game with the same ratios, Town probably still wins 9 times out of 10 just with the way they played.
For sure. And like people forget these things. Like they look at a dominant performance, and at least here we have the benefit of running this setup more times. Usually when someone hosts a game, especially a Roll Madness or a large game, it's only run once. And maybe one side dominates and they're like, oh, it was Mafia sided, oh, it was Town sided. But no, the fact of the matter is sometimes a side is just going to dominate. I mean, if anything, a good game should have the ability for one side to dominate sometimes. If they are playing well, if they have the best players, and if they're doing the best, if they're doing really well, they should be rewarded for that. That should be in the setup. It shouldn't have auto catch-up mechanisms in it, I don't think. So it just happens sometimes, and it clearly happened here.
Yeah, I mean, the core of game design philosophy is the side that plays better should win.
Yeah.
That's everything else is just icing.
Yeah.
But let's move on from mechanical stuff and get back into talking into like how the actual game went. There is a moment that happened very early in the game that I really want to talk about because it's funny as hell.
I know where this is going.
It is the I want to talk about the much memed on shit read. If you want to set the scene for us, Jay, go ahead.
Very well. The game had just began. I don't remember how long it had been, but it feels as though it had been 20 minutes, 30 minutes, no more. Could be wrong. And I hadn't really noticed that Nuxl had started off somewhat quietly until he entered the thread and indicated that he had been in the bathroom. And this triggered me, I'll be honest. When I hurled this accusation at Nuxl, it wasn't fake. It was real. It was a genuine thought that I had in my real brain that it was suspicious for him to have elected to go to the bathroom at the moment the much hyped tournament Game 6 began. This is supposed to be a big deal. I know not everybody feels that way, but it's a competitive environment. And to elect to go take a pee, which was my first interpretation, at that moment struck me as suspicious. Nuxl then corrected me. It was a number 2, not a number 1. And
the details are important.
Right. And
They really were.
I spent a few posts throwing mud at Nuxl on the matter. To be honest, while it was a real read, I never expected it to be something that we would be lynching Nuxl for. And the real utility for me was just to open the game with something, to create content, to create opportunities for other people, not named Nuxl, to interact with my shit read, because it is objectively a stupid read.
A shitty read, you might say.
Yeah. And on some level, I think that may have been where it was most beneficial, because I believe Mellow Eslo interacted with it in a way that was a little bit problematic. But I'm sorry for that, Nuxl. You should have the right to take a shit in peace.
Yes, thank you.
Like-
Confession, I didn't actually go to the bathroom, but
Like, Nuxl didn't want to rant scum, and then he can't even go to the bathroom. It's not fair, guys. Please be sweeter to him. I'm sorry, Nuxl.
No, he was absolutely hiding in Wolf chat. He didn't go to the bathroom.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Nuxl.
mhm. Yeah, I was trying to reach out to Mello because no, I think at the time being I was trying to reach out to Mello because he posted in thread but didn't respond to Wolf chat. And I was actually I think I was actually in Wolf chat during that time when the game was opening up, just trying to set up a Discord for everyone inside. I thought it was actually really funny that you town read me or like town leaned me or something a few pages later, even though after like the content of the read, I assumed it was just mainly because of the interaction itself. I didn't actually know it was a giant meme, I guess, because I stopped looking at spec chat and everything after that, after I like got lynched. So, or like a couple hours after I got lynched. But it was like but I guess it's, I don't know. I think you make reads off of stuff like that. I think that's like entirely fair. I think some of my like strongest reads have been just from like dumb like, not like angle shoots, but I don't know how you would phrase it, but just like dumb like tonal stuff like that, because they're just like incredibly like hard to just like hard to not hard to fake just one alignment, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to like word this in a way where it makes sense, but I think that's like a completely reasonable read. I think you read people off of silly things and that's fine. Just as long as it's not, you know, terrible / agenda. But yeah.
Maybe not so much like hard to fake, so much as like really weird to think of to fake. And just like really esoteric, like this sort of thing always comes from town, etc. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, basically. Or I guess like one element over the other. So.
Right. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
It was really funny though. I was actually just making stuff up like in the first couple pages because I was just so bored. But
the first couple pages were interesting. I remember clashing with SPF very early just because she came into the thread and immediately started picking apart my posts. And I'm someone who likes to take early game like at the beginning of the thread. I like to play very loose. I like to joke around. I like RVS. I like just messing around. And just the negative attention so early just irritated me. And we resolved it within a few pages of just like, this is obviously just like a playstyle difference between the two of us. I think that was one of the more introspective moments of the game for both myself and SPF, for us both to look at it objectively and just put it aside and move on. But I think early game itself and the first couple pages were definitely full of a lot of interesting reads and moments.
I mean, Cobalt, when that happens, you just need to stay positive, friend.
Exactly.
By the way, we have DS the GOAT, as he calls himself, in the chat.
DS,
Darren Sanders, what's up? Actually, I have a question. So, and it's related to what we were talking about with the hammer. Getting back to that. Say you don't lynch, or say Begbo flips town. What happens after that? Who do you lynch? How does the game change?
I was worried about being on the chopping block. And I think it was getting to the point where I was starting to back myself into a corner, because from the beginning of the game, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to play the way that I normally play when I'm town, because I forgot about the post restriction. I usually just spew myself through sheer volume, and that wasn't going to be an option this game. So I remember looking at it halfway through day one, and then also work was taking up so much time, and I wasn't in the thread as often as I would have liked. And I was sort of on the edge of a bunch of players' reads, and I was like, I think I'm going to have to play a little more reserved this game, and just taking off of what JaggedJimmyJay and SPF and Giraffe were doing, I figured I would be a lot more of a facilitator and just sort of trying to back up the plays that I thought were good. But at some point in the game, I felt like my luck was going to run out, because I did wind up playing defense most of the time, especially during like early day 2, I believe, if I remember correctly. But I think if Begbo had flipped town, I would have worried about being somewhat near next on the list, or I would have at least had to fight to not be.
And I guess, I mean, the question, of course, may be more interesting for the rest of you then, if you agree with Cobalt's assessment, if he was next in line, or like, because what I'm trying to get at with this question, was there ever any road that this could go down where you guys didn't win as town? Like, let's say that Beppo just escapes the lynch, you get a mislynch, and then do you maybe reach the point where you start doubting your town core, and does it go off the rails, or do you not see that happening?
I think there was one avenue in the hypothetical world that could have broken the game for us, and that would have been if SpecJad had been right about Stay Positive Friend. I was deep in her pocket, and that was going to be extremely difficult for me to escape. Thankfully, the read was correct, but had she been Mafia, I think we would have been in a world of hurt. But really, I wouldn't say I would have been uncomfortable had Begbo flipped town. I felt extremely secure in what we had built as a team. And you were very much a part of that, Cobalt. You spent the entire game, literally from the first page, taking crap. And to be honest, I think that most towns in most games, champs or otherwise, would be inclined to lynch you day one, or at least try to. And that would be the mistake they make. You would have been the default easy out, especially perhaps after the Mellow Joke claim. And you deserve a ton of credit for fighting the fight the whole time and refusing to quit, because we cannot sweep them if the people who are in the PoE, rightly or wrongly, don't fight tooth and nail. And you did.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I just from an outside perspective, I think it felt like to me that even if Begbo had escaped day 3, I don't ever see a world where Begbo goes deep in that game, given how quickly the rest of the PoE was getting cleared by the Jotes, given the fact that all the other villagers were just posting themselves clear at a higher level than Begbo was able to. So I think it was just a case of town had Begbo in a box. I don't think he was ever breaking out of the box.
Yeah, and I want to add on to that. Like, I didn't closely follow the game, but I did follow it enough, and because it was a short game, there wasn't there's less to read because you guys got it over pretty quick. Like, because I'm always a proponent of never skating by or allowing people to skate by. You sign up to play the game, stay playing the game the whole while. Don't halfway turn it into a game of, well, we have this PoE, we have this court, let's just lynch people one after the other and then make a few posts to say, oh, let's just do this. Like, don't stop playing the game. And my impression is that this didn't happen for you. So I want to give all of you a lot of credit for this, because like Jay had his thing with, I can't recall the term for it, but like, you kept giving reads, you kept looking at it from different angles, and kept giving reasoning and asking and prodding. And like, I think that's a very healthy approach to the game. Because what happens, like, if Mafia were to win such a game like this, it would be because they snuck in town core and was allowed to just stay there, and just because once you're in town core, the easiest thing to do is if everyone is just in, well, if you agree with me, then you're good. Then you can stay in the town core. And it's easy for a mafia to agree with you if they're in the town core, because the agreement would be to lynch other people. Like, you're not making life difficult for them.
Yeah.
So as long as you avoid that scenario, you should be good.
I do want to move on really quickly because we're starting to run a little short on time here. Something I wanted to talk about that I thought was really interesting were a couple of these like in-thread exercises that Jay introduced with the gun-to-head reads and the trust fall, and I just wanted to ask if you could elaborate a little more on those and like where they came from and why you think they're helpful for town.
Sure. The gun-to-head reads exercise is something like I mentioned earlier in the podcast. I derived from season 2, I believe it was game 2, the qualifier in that. Some folks have asserted that I came up with them, and I want to make sure it's clarified that I did not. I stole them from a user named BCB in season 2. He played with Achromatic and I in the game that ThingyMan mentioned. And I think he came up with it on the spot. I remember him being extremely frustrated that various players were providing reads lists, and those reads lists were filled with null and neutral and I don't know and leaning and words like that. And he complained about it loudly, and that resonated with me a great deal. It had a great deal of influence on me. And he ran the exercise. He threw names into the thread and say, take a stance. Is this town? Is this mafia? Nothing in between is permitted. You have to take a stance. And I saw immense potential in that. And I've been doing it ever since. I admit there have been cases where I've done it as a mafioso just to waste time. But I think it has genuine utility. One thing I mentioned in the game was that I've noticed, at least when I've employed the exercise on players who haven't seen it before, to my knowledge, that Mafia have the tendency, generally, not always, to name more players town on average than the town players name town. And I think it's self-explanatory why they might do so. You don't want to ruffle feathers when you're forced to take stances that you did not expect to be forced to take. So when you're forced to choose on a player who might be in a swing slot between town and Mafia, you might more likely opt for town. Now, in this case, we went the opposite direction. Nuxl actually was one of the most paranoid people in that exercise. So again, everything is contextual. The data itself, I think its value is limited to how you perceive it relative to the isolations within which you analyze it. If you just look at the chart that I made on its own and say, lynch the player with the most Mafia reads, I think that's erroneous and that's faulty. But its usefulness is contextual.
There are definite player differences to take into account. One thing I want to ask you here, have you, and I don't know if this is already part of the strategy or whatever we call it, have you taken timing into account? And what I mean by this is because this is something I do. I make sure that the player I want to ask this question, I haven't phrased it as gun to head, but it's actually a similar principle. I make sure that the person I want to ask about this is in the thread, ready to answer immediately, because I want their immediate thoughts. If they take time, I can't use that for anything. Like, I want their immediate thoughts. I want them to just write their immediate train of thought, free-flowing, boom, go immediately. Because obviously, and often it won't, even town members won't necessarily have like good thoughts, but they'll have unique or varied thoughts in a way that it's hard for Mafia to replicate, because Mafia, especially when put on a spot like that, they're really thinking about what they can write, and usually just ends up being a meh answer, whereas town can really go on a, like when they just are asked to say whatever, that can be pretty clearing in some cases.
I think that let me regather my train of thought here. Timing matters to the extent to which one can reasonably judge it. I know that when we're interpreting posts on a message board forum in real time, we're forced to account for things like internet connections, whatever distractions they may have in the room, what other tabs they have open while the game is being played. And with that in mind, I think I'm hesitant to interpret it too harshly if somebody is a little slower. But it's not that it's irrelevant. It certainly matters. And I think it played out in this game. if I recall correctly, the last person to respond to each of my gun-to-head read prompts was Mello Eslo. So perhaps he needed a little extra time to come up with answers. Understandably, it's a difficult situation.
I should maybe rephrase because, I actually also do apply timing to some situations, but I only do it when it's very quick timing. So in general, even if I didn't ask someone to be quick, if I can see that they wrote a very long post very quickly with a lot of thoughts that are very varied, I will maybe give that time points. But no, what I meant was if you've ever considered to like if I go to Cobalt, can you tell me when you're in a thread and you have 5 minutes to write an answer to what I'm about to ask you? Can you tell me when you're there? And then he says, I'm here, and I ask the question right away. Like if you've considered doing that to force him to give an answer right away.
I haven't done that specifically, though I think it sounds like it has a great deal of potential. You're essentially eschewing the limitations of the forum format and shoving them into a video Mafia or live Mafia situation. And if they're not prepared for that, that might give them difficulty. So I think it's a good idea, certainly.
Yeah.
I honestly wonder if the utility of the gun-to-head reads, thinking about how I'd react to those sorts of things if I was a villager. I almost think that I would find them more useful to me personally as a way to actually sort out how I feel about certain slots more so than I would use them to read other people. Because speaking for myself, I can tend to be sort of like a non-confident, sort of like waffly back and forth person. I'll give a lot of null reads if I haven't put a ton of thought into someone, just because I'm like, well, I see things that could go either way. So I think that those have a lot of utility in terms of like forcing people to think about why they feel a certain way about a slot and forcing them to buckle down and start actually building worlds instead of just sort of like reading posts and clicking buttons.
I think it had a lot of use of that for me in the early game as well, because I remember not really having much of a reads list until we did the gun-to-head exercise. And now I'm like, okay, well, now I've at least got my bare minimum thoughts on each player on the table. I can use that just for my own use to go through the thread and see where I want to go from there. And of course, it's also to collaborate with the rest of the town. But I definitely agree with what Amy was saying. Like, for me at the time, it was a good tool to utilize to at least to force some thoughts out on some of these slots.
Yeah, because personally, I think a lot of people have a hard time like giving reads. So forcing them to give reads in a game that's easy to get into definitely helps them get their thoughts in, so everyone knows where they are. And the fact that we don't let them do nulls forces them to try to read the slot even if they don't really want to. So it helps us understand town thoughts, and it could also put Mafia in a bubble. I actually utilized JaggedJimmyJay's the game and another site as soon as I got into the game, because of my role was kind of special. I was constantly trying to get everyone to post it, and the funny thing is that I noticed that a lot of the wolves people that gave like because I remember specifically one person didn't want to do it, and then when he gave it he did it twice, because the first time he did it he was completely trolling, and I just find it funny that like even in this game, like I think I remember pointing out that almost all the people that utilize like special characters like question marks and deviating from what the whole game was of either town or not town, and I noticed that from those two games so far, I noticed that Mafia tend to deviate from the rules more than the town do.
Because Mafia is uncomfortable early game with taking hard stances. They want to leave their options open, see which way the PoE develops, etc., etc. Makes sense.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, so to agree with Jay, I think the benefit to this would be forcing people into an uncomfortable spot, and Mafia and town. And when people are uncomfortable, that's maybe what they say while uncomfortable is maybe easier to read than whatever else, right? But to play devil's advocate, I do think a lot of good information can be gathered from wishy-washy or null posts. in the sense that at least if you force people to say things that they wouldn't otherwise say, is my point there. If you force people to say things that they wouldn't otherwise say because they think it's not important enough, well, sometimes it's those things that are the most information-rich posts because they're out of the norm. They're not standard. And they might be thoughts that, well, you can't fake that. Because what Mafia would think of faking that? That's just weird. It's just because you're not even doing a hard stance on anything. You're not analyzing. You're just doing something weird. And that may be a source of good information. So that's why I think it's always good to force people to say, well, even if you think this is not worth talking about, please just say whatever's on your mind. There may be something in there.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, we're still running a little short on time. I'll keep things moving along. I did want to talk briefly about the flavor, but we'll just skip over that. I just wanted to say that it's put a lot of effort into it.
I loved the flavor, Amy. I loved it. Oh my god.
Flavor ever written.
I didn't read it.
I greatly.
It's a lot of words. I don't blame you.
I greatly enjoy flavor that like I did a lot when I hosted some games, when there were some pretty big games that I hosted, like when I hosted like Teen Wolf and like Final Fantasy 12, like I did a lot of narrative flavor where like I basically wrote based on the outcome of the phase. And I think a lot of flavor writers do that, but I really, really liked the nature of the flavor in this game where it was completely just disconnected from the game and it was just telling a really like unique and awesome set of stories. I really liked it.
I had some I did have some vaguely like I had like a vague outline planned of the order I wanted to do things in because I had like a couple of different ideas going into this. So there were some like vague symbolic connections to which alignment flipped going into things, but in the past I've tried to do things where I like completely differentiate the flavor based on which alignment flips or which player flips. And what I find is that that's fucking impossible unless you write literally everything in advance, and I'm awful at doing that. So this was mostly to preserve my own sanity and to make it so that I could save stuff until the night before like I usually do.
I just want to say, from what I saw, I also love the flavor. And I think a couple of years ago, I hosted what was supposed to be my last MASH Roll Madness game. It was unfortunately ruined by cheating. So I've always thought I have to make a new going out game. And if I ever do that, I hope to team up with you, Amy. So I hope to be able to find a theme that you could write a flavor with for comfortably. And
hey, I'm in.
Awesome.
Yeah, let's move on from that. I do want to before the podcast started, when we were in the planning stages, Jay brought up a really interesting potential topic of conversation that I wanted to make sure we hit on, and that was shoot, I just had it and then I clicked away from it.
I have it. Oh, okay.
That was, how do you think you perform in this game if everything is the same except you're on the opposite team? So for the villagers, if you're a villager, if you're a wolf facing down this absurdly steamrolling village, how do you think you approach that? And if you're Nuxl, how do you think you approach being a part of said village and trying to find wolves?
I mean, I think with the way that this particular game played out, I think as the opposite alignment, my playstyle actually would have been rather similar, if only because I think the fact that the position that I put myself in, just sort of trying to facilitate and play around a lot of the big voices, I don't think that would have changed if I were a wolf. I think what would have changed was I think I would have put a little bit more effort into entrenching myself into the more outspoken voices, because that's what I do when I'm a wolf. My season 5 qualifier showed a lot of that when I played with Fable, and I forget who else was on the Scum team with us, but I tend to do that a lot when I'm Scum, especially in a high profile game like this. I would have tried to put myself a little more out there and entrench myself in those voices so that I wouldn't be differentiated from them as much. Whereas as Town here, I sort of had the opposite effect, where I was sort of had to thrive on sort of the edge of the PoE, and I don't think I would have been as comfortable with doing that if I were a wolf.
Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. Had everything been the same and I had been a mafioso in this game, I would have had struggles, significant struggles. Much of the way that I play demands that I have accurate reads so people can rely on me. And if I am a mafioso, I can't do that, or I'm lynching my own team. And if I'm trying to lynch town, I am not garnering the same trust I otherwise would have. I can't try to occupy the same role of leadership, or at least not with the same effectiveness. And most importantly, I'm trying to generate cases against the towniest town that ever towned. And that sounds horrible. I don't envy the wolf.
But well, I'm curious then, Jay, because this is a common problem for top tier players, at least players that have a good town reputation. This is the problem they stumble into when they're a mafia. The high expectations of them, and when they don't deliver, they're suspected or at least not listened to. So I'm curious to hear how you generally deal with that, because the fact of the matter is, and this does happen for good players, and we've seen it in Mafia Championship as well. Good players also have bad reads sometimes. It just happens. So do you still try to be a leader and just lead them the wrong way, or do you take a step back and let maybe the town devour itself, if that's even a possibility? And maybe it wouldn't have been in this game.
I think given what people have come to expect of me over the last 9 years, if I am not assertively attempting to put myself in a position of leadership, then I am already outed. So I definitely try. And I'm not always successful. It is not easy to do. And it really depends upon the concerted effort of my opponents if I am facing the town. And if they work as hard as the Game 6 town did in this game, then I honestly don't know how I'm going to go about that. I will try. I will fight tooth and nail, and I will never surrender, but it will present me with serious difficulties. And I think it would for anybody who plays remotely like I do, because you're forced to either lynch your own team and rely on credit, which I think is very limited in a game, especially in a game with this power role arrangement, or fabricate cases against players who are not suspicious. So good luck.
I mean, it's definitely difficult, but just to plug my own article, Powerwolfing, I do think it's achievable, because you lynch a town day one. If you force that through, you still have all your team members. So it's only a certain percentage of the town you need to get on the wrong track. And they're not all going to agree on the same mafia target. Even if they all have mafia suspicions, if they're spread out, it may be more difficult for them. So it's about getting that momentum going from early on, I think, and then making the right night kills. And it becomes more manageable as you go on.
I guess another question I have, and it's actually something that DS kind of typed in spec chat at the same time I had the thought, is how much do you weigh other people's meta expectations of you in a champs game where you can never be entirely sure if people are actually going to meta dive you, or if you're just going to be playing with a bunch of people you've never played with before?
I think, I don't know, I actually value meta like really highly, because I think a lot of, so like into current Smogon like gameplay revolves around the sort of like quote unquote top players in the player list having extremely accurate meta reads on each other, and then they're able to solve the game based on that. So I mean, sometimes you'll see like scum win, but I guess the win rate's about 50-50, so never mind. But usually a lot of the town cores are set up by people just knowing each other's meta very well. So having like so the way that I sort of approach a game has to deal with a lot of meta, which you didn't see any of this game because everyone's scum. But I actually tried to take some time to read people's games, just because I find I feel like a good percentage of people have discernible differences between their like town and scum games, that I actually think that I actually think personally I would have had like fairly high like meta expectations, but I can understand like site culture and people not having this sort of like thought process. But
I guess a follow-up question I have for you is, did the fact that you're rolling scum, yes, but on a site where you basically never played with anybody else in the game before, and you have no way of knowing if they actually are going to know your meta, did that make it any easier for you, do you think, to play scum? Because you say you're an easy town read off of meta, but nobody here has meta on you.
well, I mean, I've actually played with DS before. I played with Wisp once on a different site, but we were Mafia together. So I actually think that I guess like format of the champs, people are branded into different games based on time slot. But I've actually played with a couple people on this playlist before, and I don't know if they would have accurate meta reads on me, but especially DS, I played with DS multiple times, and he's seen the difference between my like town and scum games, like fairly like well, and people who played with me know that like my town and scum games are just so vastly different from each other. So I guess in context of like people not knowing my meta, it was a bit easier, yeah. But I still think I messed up and had a lot of like generic reads on me to be like overtly like scum red for the things I've done in thread or hadn't done, I guess. So I guess you could say it was a little easier, but it still wasn't very easy at all.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Real quick, since we're at the very end of time here, I just want to go around and ask everybody what their most memorable or funniest moment of the game was, or post that someone else made, etc., etc.
And while you guys think about that, if as we are near, then if anyone in chat has a final question they want to shoot at any of these people, go right ahead.
I think for me, my favorite moment that best summarized the entire experience of Game 6 was, I believe, day 2, in the midst of the fake Jack of all trades claims. Carrot simply said, "I want to give everyone in this game a hug." It really symbolized what we had achieved as a team. We weren't just playing together effectively. We loved each other as much as people can in a Mafia game where they've never met each other before. It was beautiful, and I cherish it.
Yeah, this is one of the most friendly games that I played in. Yeah, Oh, sorry. I can't really think.
Wish I could relate.
I think that I still think a lot of the comments towards the end of day 1 when we were lynching Mello, just like that whole meme that I forgot who made it, but that whole meme in itself is just made my day.
The spec chat meme.
Yeah.
Yeah, the spec chat meme was really good. Big fan.
Who made that?
I want to say, I think a couple of people kind of contributed it. I think the one that posted like the final version was Rabbit.
Can you guys, for those who don't know about it?
Oh, that was a good one too.
Let me see if it's pinned. I might be able to pull it up and drop it in Twitch chat if it is, which
Someone
it should be. And if it's not, then this is an egregious oversight on the part of the mods. SMH.
Very least, the game.
Here it is. Okay, it looks like Litton posted the version that got.
Not surprising.
So I need to copy. I'm not copying.
While AB does that, I have a question from a Twitch chat. And yeah, the link is in the Twitch chat now. DS asks, is the game a sweep without DS in it?
No. That's an easy question. No.
Definitely not.
It was a collective team effort.
Remove any of the people in that game, and I don't know if we sweep. Whether it's the people who are the loudest that received votes at the end, whatever, or the people who are in the PoE at the end of the game, like Tim Dude, Cyclone Cash before he was cleared, Riceland. Everybody had to contribute something, or else we don't sweep. It takes everyone.
And I think that's I agree with that. And with this being such a dynamic and interactive game, like you can't just take out one piece of the puzzle and expect it to be solved the same way. Like it's impossible to say exactly what effects one player had on another player, which then had an effect on a third player, and how the whole thing plays together. So I would always agree with that statement. Yeah, and if the rest of you had any memorable moments or funny moments or anything else you want to say as we're nearing the end of the podcast.
Just like any last thoughts you want to get out there.
Yeah.
I loved who made the D&D alignments meme.
That was GH. That was General Hank.
Yeah, because the one where the fact that I got posted as lawful evil with that one like super sassy post that I made at SPF, I literally was like rolling.
I believe it says, and I quote, "Okay, honestly, are you going to pick apart literally everything I say, or can you let me be thrilled with the progress so far?"
Literally.
And here's that one in Twitch chat.
I think another funny moment was when Fatmo meant to spoiler his post and then ended up doing a line strike through the whole thing.
Oh, that was really good.
Yeah, Mel's is the best. It just says Tim Hortons.
Tim Hortons.
Tim Hortons.
And then SPF is also good. Spec chat only wishes.
I see Element Giraffe in the chat saying, I love the entire Game 6, to be honest. Is that Giraffe Syrup by any chance? If so, shout out. Good to see you.
I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I would assume that's Giraffe Syrup.
Yeah, that is indeed Giraffe. Nice.
The best teammates I've ever had. Giraffe Syrup.
Also wouldn't have happened without you, Giraffe. All right. Well, I want to say thank you to all of you for joining me here today. And especially thanks to Amy for being my co-host or main host today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And again, like I think I want to give even more credit to the flavor, because like that's awesome, and I always love seeing flavor. And I do hold the opinion that we can do even better on flavor generally on MU. I think because we have the modbot, the average show tends to get a bit lazy with that, and it's it's understandable, right?
I think especially in Champ, there's a certain level of like standardization that happens because you can't really mess with the roles. I know a lot of the time in the past with my more flavorful games, I've done the entire design top down, where I come up with the flavor concept first, and then I design the whole game based on that before any balance considerations. But even when I can't do that, I try to make things feel at least a little flavorful through the cold sterilization of champs.
And that's awesome. So thank you to you, Amy, for hosting and for both the game and this. Thank you to Cobalt, Nuxl, Jay, Wisp for being on this podcast. Thank you to everyone in Game 6 for delivering us an epic game, one for the history books, I dare say. Let's see if we will ever have a town sweep again. Maybe we'll have it this season. Oh, who knows?
No.
No. Amy says no. All right, that's a bet for Spec Chat.
Please have another town sweep. I don't want to be the only one.
I just wanted to say one more time, everyone in the game, town, Mafia, like Nuxl, you can't get down on yourself either. I thought you played really well. Spec, you certainly had Spec Chat fooled, even if this absurd town wasn't necessarily misled. But everyone played super great, and I'm so glad that this is the game I got to host, because it was really awesome to watch everything unfold. And thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Amy, of course, also put this together. So just kudos to Amy. This was truly a town just using all their ultimates at once, and they were just loaded from the very first second of the game. It's not fair at all. So hope you guys don't have ultimates in your next game. That wouldn't be very fair. All right. So thanks again to you. Thanks to everyone who tuned in for the podcast. And we'll be back tomorrow with Game 5. And get ready to say, for the realm. For the realm. Tim Hortons and for the realm. Tim Hortons for the realm. All right. So that's 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Be there or be square. And that's me, ThingyMan, out for now.